Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, welcome to the third annual conference of the Iranian Studies Unit of the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. I'm Mehran Kamrava. I'm professor of government at Georgetown University in Qatar, and I also direct the Iranian Studies Unit here at the Arab Center. The Look East policy has been an ongoing feature of the foreign policy of the Islamic Republic since the 1990s. Some observers even trace it a little earlier, to the late 1980s, to the second term of the presidency of Hashemi Rafsanjani. It's since 2021 and the start of the current Raisi administration, however, that we hear the term look to the East as a deliberate formal policy of the Islamic Republic. Over the last 2 years, in fact, we've seen significant manifestations of this policy outlook. Perhaps the most important has been Iran's success in gaining membership to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization last July, and just a few weeks ago, Iran was admitted formally to the BRICS group as of January 2024. Besides membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS, under the auspices of the Look East policy, the volume of Iran's trade and its relations with countries historically identified as part of the East, countries like China, Russia, the states of Central Asia, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and even Japan and South Korea, has grown substantially over the last decade or so. This has occurred at the same time as comprehensive US-led sanctions have reduced Iran's trade and diplomatic relations with the countries of Europe to almost nothing. We have seen an expansion of the concept of East as a geostrategic construct in Iranian foreign policy thinking to include not just countries to Iran's east, but also countries in Latin America and Africa as well. Iran's membership in the BRICS is a prime indication of Look East not as a purely geographic outlook, but essentially as a broader global strategic reorientation. Significantly, the Look East policy has been accompanied by a parallel, simultaneous foreign policy endeavor called the good neighborly policy. Again, this so-called good neighbor relations is not a new development in Iranian foreign policy. We've seen a number of efforts at détente between Iran and its neighbors, particularly its Arab neighbors, and we have even seen the proposal of a security architecture involving Iran and countries like Saudi Arabia and others, the Hormuz peace endeavor. But what is new about the good neighborly policy is its open declaration at rhetorical and discursive levels, as well as in terms of policy outlooks. The rapprochement with Saudi Arabia, significantly improved ties with the United Arab Emirates, successful diffusion of border tensions with Afghanistan, tension reduction efforts with Azerbaijan, and major inroads in diplomatic relations and trade with Central Asia are all the result of this good neighborly relations. All of these have combined to further reinforce the Look East policy of the Islamic Republic. Over the next 2 days, we are fortunate to have a stellar group of scholars with us to help us better understand the causes, processes, and consequences of Iran's Look East policy. Our keynote speaker, one of the most experienced practitioners and observers of Iranian foreign policy, a veteran diplomat and an accomplished scholar rolled into one, will explain to us the conceptual underpinnings of the Lookist policy. We will then have analyses of how the policy fits into possible broader global reorientations, what it means symbolically and strategically, and how it has manifested itself in regards to Iran-Russia relations. China, India, Malaysia, Azerbaijan, and the South Caucasus, Turkmenistan, and the rest of Central Asia, and their place in Iran's Lookist policy will all be examined tomorrow, as will be issues of Iranian trade and finance. As you see, we're all in for a wonderful intellectual treat over the next 2 days. I have said enough. Let me now introduce the reason why we're all here, our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is someone I am proud to call a friend since the 1980s. And I apologize, Dr. Sajjadpour, because that ages us. Now everybody knows how old we are. Seyed Mohammad Kazem Sajjadpour is currently Professor of International Relations at the School of International Relations in Tehran. He's also an advisor to the Iranian Foreign Minister. Dr. Sajjadpour is a distinguished senior fellow at the Institute for Political and International Studies, an institute that incidentally was fortunate to have him as president at some point. As part of a long and distinguished diplomatic career, Dr. Sajjadpour served as Deputy Foreign Minister and as Ambassador of the Islamic Republic to the United Nations. He received his PhD in political science from George Washington University and was a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker.
Thank you very much, Professor Kamrava. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I thank God for giving me such opportunity to share my views and ideas here in this distinguished August audience. I congratulate the center. I congratulate Professor Azmi Beshara for having such a center in our neighborhood, which really is rich in terms of production. And I thank everybody for contributing to understanding Iran. Since today is Arba'in, and the 40th day after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, so I would share sympathy with all those who share the causes of Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, for whom every Muslim has a type of attachment. And today, coinciding these two events, I think, shows how Iran is and how Iran should be looked in a way. However, since Professor Kamrava introduced me with some official titles, and I'm not always talking officially, I would say my talks here is purely my personal view and is academic. Usually I say this by a couple of jokes, and since he has encouraged me in the past by telling more jokes, I would share one of the old jokes, which is a disclaimer of what I have today to say is not the official, but is also connected with the spirit of, let's say, what's going on. And the joke, since we are in an area, very hot area, and a lot of camels in this area, the joke is what's the difference between a camel, an ambassador, and a professor? Have you heard? And of course, I apologize to some ambassadors who are here today in advance, and since I personally was an ambassador. The joke says a camel can drink. It can work for a month and not drink, and nothing will happen. Huh? is in the deserts. A camel can work for a month and not drink, and nothing will happen. An ambassador, sorry, of course, can drink for a month and not work, and, and nothing will happen. Huh? It is as it is. And sorry, professors, scholars, think tankers can go to conferences, have presentations, write books, peer-reviewed journals, and nothing will happen. So with this praising of scholars, let me go to the topic that I'm here to talk about, and that is Iran and the East. I try to be as scholarly as I can, and as I think here, I wouldn't consume my second joke, I use it in the end. I try to have a conceptual framework on the issue that we are talking about, and the conceptual framework is consisted of a question: how we can understand the interaction of Iran and the East at large. This is the major question: how to understand. So I'm here in the business of production of understanding. In answering this, I have a type of ABC, three concepts, three baskets of concepts. First is what I call accumulated reasons behind this interaction. So A is this accumulated reasons, and B is building structures, what structures build Iranian outlook or Iranian interaction with the East. And finally, conducting concepts and processes, exactly in the framework that we are advised to talk about. Before going to these three concepts or three baskets of concepts, I would like to say, unfortunately, there are simplistic approaches toward the study of Iran and the East. Very simplistic, sometimes one variable analysis that Iran is submitting to this country or submitting to that country. Iran is a lot of simple depiction of a very complex process and complex setting. Furthermore, we have a reductionist approach that reduces the policies of Iran with the East to very simple, sometimes just even one country, Iran and China, Iran and Russia, and neglecting the, let's say, the depth of the East as a concept. Furthermore, there is also an alarmistic approach. They alarm, oh, Iran is looking toward to the East, as if it is a security issue, a securitized issue, and something of a very difficult implication. I think these are not scientifically well framed, and I think they lack access to the realities of Iran and predispositions negating Iran as a regional power and as a member of Asia at large, or the reasons behind of this simplistic, reductionist, alarmistic approach. I want to distance from this type of analysis, which sometimes is used as political propaganda to attack Iran, especially by media, what I call fast food analysis. You know, immediately if there is a visit, for example, from Iran to Russia, our president meets a president of China, then fast food analysis factory produces very, let's say, harmful, intellectually packaged sandwich for analysis, which I think these processes don't produce analytical understanding. If that is the case, then how we can understand Iran's foreign policy or Iran's Eastern outlook? First, accumulated reasons. Here I have three concepts under this basket. First, anger. Iran is angry of the West, very clearly. Iran is angry of the West. Why? Because we have interacted with the West, and the result has been negating even the principles that they have accepted. It is not new, it is deep-rooted, but look at the last few years. Iran negotiated JCPOA, implemented it, then suddenly the President of the United States withdrew from it. And the candidate, presidential candidate who was running for office to replace him said, I will return. Did he return? No. Betrayal, negating their own commitments. So if you are Iran, wouldn't you be angry at this type of interaction? Is it new? No. During the last 40 years, 43 years, the West has treated Iran as a type of abnormal, let's say, entity, naming and shaming and shooting and whatever you want to see, using all available means and tools to really crush, even change the system, as they call it, regime change, by wars, by clandestine activities, by propaganda, and so on and so forth. Is it just a post-revolutionary phenomenon? No. It is in the history of Iran that the West has not treated Iran well. During Qajar time, we wanted to have railroad. They said, oh, Iran cannot have railroad because it is against peace of security of the world. During first Pahlavi, Iran wanted to have a steel factory. They didn't sell it to Iran. Finally, Iran, because of the, let's say, division in the West, could buy one from Germany, but it was sunk in the sea. Iran nationalized its oil. Security Council of the United Nations had a meeting that nationalization of Iranian oil is against peace and security of the world. So we are angry at this process, at this interaction. And the least, I'm not going to go to blame game. I'm analytically speaking, if you look at analytically with what Iran has been done to by the West, so you see anger. But Iran is not just an emotional actor. When I say anger, even rational actors get dismayed and angry of how the others treated them. But Iran, the second concept is have an answer. That means Iran has option. East is not option. Yes, of course, we know East is not the West. The West is not the East. But I think the era of hegemonic dominance of the West is over. It is not one option, a state of the world. We have different options. So if you push Iran, don't think that Iran would submit. Don't think that Iran would be put on its knees. No, Iran has options. Iran has spaces. There are available spaces, and Iran, furthermore, can create spaces. So I think this is very important response or reflective, let's say, process. But however, I don't want to limit Iranian Eastern policy to this psychological reading as well as the strategic availability of spaces for Iran. Furthermore, I would go to my third concept in the first basket, and that is Iran is an actor. It is not just a responsive actor, it is a proactive actor. Iran is not new to international politics. And Iran is not just an object to play with. Iran is an actor. And I think it's very important. Actually, as a student of Iranian foreign policy for a few decades, I have to say the literature sometimes ignores this actorship of Iran, that Iran is an actor. And an actor is aware that it cannot be used. Yes, there were some instances 2 centuries ago that Iran didn't have this possibility of being as actor. Even at that time, there were spaces of actorship, but I think this actorship shows that Iranian policy toward the East is a calculated policy, is designed based on the interests of Iran. It is not just a response to what we see by the West also, and the others. So I think by this, the reasons are clear. The reasons are the interests of Iran, and the interests should be preserved, and preservation needs calculation, and calculation needs an actorship which is based on wisdom and also keeping in mind the reality. If that is clear, let me go to the second basket, that is the building structures of Iranian policy toward the East. What do I mean by building structures? Iranian policy toward East is not born out of blue. It is rooted in a context, in a structure. What are the components of this structure? My first answer to this is Iran is being a part of East, being from the East. That means Iran is part of Asia by all means. How? First of all, by geography. By geography, Iran is considered, and geography still is a very important element. Geography back is, was the title of Foreign Affairs a few years ago. Geopolitics of Iran is geopolitics of the East, is Asian geopolitics. This is why in the United Nations we are part of Asian group. An Asian group in the United Nations is a very important group. So geography, furthermore, Asia and the East was living before the West was born. Here it brings the civilizational factor. The East is composed of civilizational factors, and Iran, like India, like China, like a few others, are not just state actors per se, they are civilizational actors. This is why there is a group organized just a few years ago, and it's called Ancient Civilization Group, or the exact title is somehow has this word, ancient civilization. And they are from Latin America, from Europe, from Asia, and actually I was representing Iran in one of the ministerial meetings in Bolivia a few years ago. Then I noticed, civilizational factors also matters in being as we are. Furthermore, along with geography, with history, with civilizational factors, there are institutions in Asia in the East, which are ignored by the literature. For example, a very interesting one, right now 30 years old, is SICA, Conference on Security and Cooperation in Asia. We all remember, of course, the headquarters is in Astana. Now this conference is going to become an organization, but it is just one. There are plenty of institutions which brings the East together. And what I said about SICO is one of them. We have Asian Development Cooperation, another internationally designed pan-Asian, let's say, institution. And the list goes on. And it is an increasing process of these institutions. You mentioned a few, Shanghai, even BRICS, that Iran was accepted as a new member, which is a very important development, very important development. These are institutions with a good chunk of Asian flavor. It is East in a way. Shanghai is East. BRICS is East in a way. So there are institutional component of this being. And I can go to this being for the rest of the talk, but let me go to my the second concept in this basket. That is becoming. It's not about being, it is about becoming Asia. How? Now international politics is becoming Asianized. Huh? It is a globalized process that everybody is looking to the East. Why you single out Iran? Why you make Iran as a, let's say, security issue in this regard? Who doesn't look at Asia and the East? Give me one example. I think all actors are turning to Asia. Why? Because Asia is different from 25 years ago, 30. And I'm not just limiting Asia to the East. I think East and West Asia both are becoming more important. This region that we are living is becoming very important. And I think the Iranian-Saudi rapprochement is so significant and so important in this regard, in the West Asia. This mood of cooperation between Iran and the Arab world, which I have to really appreciate Dr. Azmi Beshara. He was trying for this for many years, and I came here, I think about 7 years ago, for a conference on Iran and the Arab world, which was a different atmosphere. But right now, this is very different. So Asia, look at East Asia. And don't limit Asia to India, and let's say Russia is Russian, Asian, Eurasian actor. There are many countries in this region that are becoming very important globally. Indonesia, India. In Central Asia, you have, I was in Central Asia with Professor Kamrava just 6 weeks ago, I think. I was astonished by the degree of, let's say, this awareness of Central Asian to play a role in international politics. So, Asia is becoming the subject of international politics. Pivoting to Asia is a global trend. It is not the word just used for American containment of China. I think this pivot is everywhere. And Iran is part of Asia. And I have to say, in this specific international political economy aspect, that really Asia is rising. Who can ignore it? Furthermore, you cannot really think in the old Cold War mentality of vertical international politics, that you have a hierarchy of global players, then the rest have to be in their blocks. I think now the global politics, while there are elements of verticality, there are tendencies for a horizontal perspective in which small states matter. Qatar is a player right now, a player beyond, let's say, the region. Regional powers are more important than ever. They have more space if you look at their, let's say, interaction atmosphere. And Iran is one of them in Asia, Turkey is one of them, and so on. I don't want to go to the examples because of the, let's say, the other issues that I have to cover. So these are the structures upon which Iranian Eastern outlook are shaping. But there is a third concept which also would like to touch upon. That is bilaterals. Diplomacy matters, and bilateral diplomacy matters significantly. Iran enjoys a good bilateral relationship with almost every Asian country, with the exception of the Zionist entity, which is implanted as a Western colonial outpost in this region. We enjoy a very good bilateral with almost any actor in the East. And they are very historical relations. It's not new. Look at Japan. We have almost a century of relationship with Japan. Actually, I organized an exhibition of documents of historical nature when the Prime Minister of Japan was visiting Iran, former Prime Minister, and he was astonished by the documents that we have in our archive about this relationship. The same, I was in another exhibition which our institute organized, where Chinese Foreign Ministry came to Iran for the 50th year of official relationship, but it is 50 years with the new system in China. It is over centuries and millenniums that Iran enjoys a good relationship with China at large, not just China as a country. India, Iranian relationship with India is so deep. Turkey, it is one of the most multidimensional relations in the developing country. It's not that one dimension. One of the most dimensional. We had disagreement on some issues, but the depths of the other dimensions could cover our disagreement, so there was an interruption. Furthermore, Iranian-Turkey relationship historically has been such that from 1639, that means a few years before Westphalia that we teach our students, 1648, this agreement between Iran and the Ottoman Empire, later, of course, Turkey became the successor of Ottoman Empire, still stands, has, let's say, a strong legal base for Iranian-Turkish border. And Iranian-Turkish border maybe is the only border in the Middle East that during the last 4 centuries didn't have any major, let's say, military operations. Furthermore, maybe globally it is one of the best. You have 4 centuries of stability in the borders. These are our bilaterals that matter, and I can go on the list of others. Look at Russia. I was in Moscow just 5 years ago. You know for what? For a conference of 515 years of diplomatic relationship between Iran and Russia. It is like the Encyclopedia of International Relations. Whatever has happened between 2 countries, you can find in the Encyclopedia of Iranian-Russian relationship. So I think bilaterals are this. Iranian-Russian relationship cannot be reduced to one single concept of drones, which is very dominant in the literature and reproduced in fast food analysis. So it's a deep historical ties. Bilaterals are very important, and I think it's you have to really credit the Iranian government for extending and deepening these bilaterals with these. Furthermore, on bilaterals, Iran is part of the South, global South. And let me report to you that global South is rising. Global South didn't buy the argument of Russia and the argument of America on Ukrainian war. Look at what South Africa is doing, South Africa. Even India. And you see the concept of global South in the literature is capturing attention. And joining BRICS shows that Iran is a part of global South. you cannot reduce the Global South to a few issues. The Global South is a player, I can say a continental player, even transcontinental player, not just in the continent of Africa or continent of Asia or continent of Latin America. So if you want to understand the Iranian East look policy, you have to consider how bilaterals. We have 140 almost diplomatic, let's say, centers, the embassies, consulate generals here and there, and the majority of them are in the south. So if this structure is clear, let me go to the conducting concepts and processes to finish my ABC and to finish on time. Professor Kamrava asked me, how long are you going to talk? I said, it depends on how much time you give me. I can talk for 5 minutes. I can talk for an hour, 2 hours, because sorry for my professorial friends, when you are a professor, you can talk forever. Huh? Yeah. Especially when the audience is listening. Yeah? But however, I have to finish and be on time in a few minutes. What are the conducting concepts for Iranian East look policy? First is cooperation. Very simple. Iran is for cooperation with any country which really respects Iran mutually. And this cooperation is reflected in bilaterals. Furthermore, it is also reflected in multilaterals. So I explained, I referred to BRICS, to Shanghai. Professor Kamrava also referred. These are based on cooperation. Cooperation is at the heart of diplomacy. So you cooperate with anybody who respects your principles, international principles like respect for sovereignty, independence. Let me here again go to the beginning of the talk on how West treats Iran and how cooperative countries act differently. The West always advises Iran. I'm not talking on a rhetoric base, but I have lived in the West, I have studied in the West. And I think those of you who have a deep understanding of the West, you can detect a type of normative arrogance in the West, that we are better. Our values are better than you. And you have to follow us. Lectures. They lecture the other countries. And they sanction the other countries when you talk with them because you don't observe our values. You also see double standards in the Western pattern of behavior. Look at Zionist entity. It is the, you have to read the book written by Professor Kamrava on the impossibility of Palestine, but look what they have done to Palestinians. It negates their own values, so double standard. And they have bad decisions. Look at what they did to Iraq, to Afghanistan. Now they confess. But come to the cooperative Asia. India is the, let's say, the largest democracy of the, on the global scale, but never advises the others. China doesn't put this, let's say, normative processes as the West does. Of course, every country has its own normative processes, cultural, what we call cultural diversity. But what is important is this cooperation mood. It is very, very significant and important. Furthermore, I think Iran, with other countries of the South, are making communities of the South gradually stronger. Now, compared to 2 decades ago, the community of the South has a louder voice. We belong to communities of countries which are for development, which are for, let's say, their own destiny, for not just following a pattern which is dictated, and I think this community is very important and is a conducting concept. I would be incomplete if I don't touch on the common challenges. They're all challenges to these policies. And they're all common. Common for the global South, for the East, for Iran. Of course, the challenges for us are two layers. One is as member of the global South, but there are specific challenges for each country, including us. And I think these challenges relate to this narrative making. It relates to this massive machinery. It even relates to think tanks and universities. They reproduce lack of knowledge, sorry to say, because of this instant analysis. If you go, this is a challenge. When you look at all this, but there are also global challenges. The West is not gone. The West is still is there. So there is a struggle for reestablishing again the hegemony of the West. But let me report to you that hegemony is an impossibility at a global level, at a regional level, and the era of hegemony is gone, so you have multiple layers of players at different layers and different regions. But the challenges, I think, remain, and I think the challenges, some of them are global for every player, which I think you are aware of it. So what did I say? I said, I think I stayed by the joke, huh? And my final joke, which you liked, I think. There is another joke which says, what's the difference between sorry for the distinguished ambassadors, what's the difference between an ambassador and a general and a professor? Have you heard? You heard, but you forgot. And the answer, if you ask a question from a general and you hear yes, the real answer is yes. If you hear no, the real answer is no. If you hear maybe, that person is not a general, because they should be precise. Dead on the mark, straightforward. Now, if you ask a question from an ambassador, if you hear yes, the real answer is maybe. If you hear maybe, the real answer is no. And if you hear no, that person is not an ambassador. There should be always an ambiguity, constructive ambiguity. If you ask a question from a professor, you never hear yes or no. They would say, on the one hand is this, on the other is that. We need conceptual frameworks. So what I provided you was a conceptual framework for understanding Iran's policy toward East, composed of ABC. A, accumulated reasons, anger, answer, actorship. B, building structures, being part of East, becoming a global player as East, the totality of the East, and also the significance of bilateral relations. And my C, conducting concepts and processes, cooperation, community making, of course, common challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was an absolutely terrific presentation. Really appreciate it. Would you be kind enough to take some questions? I know we had earlier decided no questions, but maybe?
No. If there are difficult questions, I would say yes or no, or as late Yasser Arafat was saying, la'am. Lo and nam together.
Okay. No, well, thank you. We just only have a couple of minutes, and we'll take a couple of questions. I'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time. Please keep your questions very concise and brief. No comments, but actual questions. And then we'll take 3 or 4 questions and go to Professor Sajjadpour. We'll start here with you, sir.
شكرا. بدك تحط الترانسليتر. شكرا دكتور. رسمت لنا صورة زاهية. اوكي اوكي اوكي. شكرا دكتور. رسمت لنا صورة زاهية عن السياسة الإيرانية والتوجه شرقا فيها. هل يعني ألم تكن هناك أخطاء ومشكلات نتيجة هذه السياسة؟ كيف تنظر مثلا إلى رؤية بعض السوريين وقناعات بعض السوريين بأن التدخل إلى جانب بشار الأسد كان خطأ فادحا وأثر على سمعتكم الأخلاقية ومخزونكم الأخلاقي لدى الكثير من السوريين والكثير من العرب؟ شكرا.
Thank you very much. Professor Abdul Wahab.
I think I'll ask a question about the last joke. What if the person was a diplomat and an academic? I think you have given an interesting framework, but this framework has some consequences. For example, when I speak about actorship, we'd like to know what is the Iran doesn't seem to see the link between its action or actorship and the consequences of that actorship. And I just want a little bit more clarification on that.
Thank you. And one last question. Yes, sir. You go ahead. Right there on the 4th row. Thank you.
مساكم الله بالخير. في الحقيقة كنا مع شخص طبيعي. البروفيسور سيد كان ماتع في لقائنا به. أهلا وسهلا. نعتذر لأنفسنا أننا لم نعرفك من قبل، ومن جانب آخر شكرا على البشارة بوجود جنوب. أصبح الآن 2 أمام 1، شرق وجنوب أمام غرب بائد إن شاء الله.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you. Oh, we got to have Professor Khalid Haroup's asking a question. Yeah, go.
Thank you very much for this. In short, Doctor, you have mentioned something very intriguing regarding Iran and others being civilizational actors, not only state actors. I'm really kind of interested in what do you mean by this? What does it entail? What kind of delivery that these countries, Iran, India, and others, would give under this kind of banner, civilizational actor? Thank you.
6 minutes. Yeah. So thank you very much for the questions. Though I was not prepared for the questions, but the first question, I think it analytically, not politically. You know, when you are talking politically, you should reduce a whole question, a whole, let's say, crisis to one single person, then demonize him, then shoot him. As we say, as I said, naming, shaming, and shooting. These are the psychological components when you are in active politics. But when you are in analytical world, you have to take different variables and the complexities of situations together. I am trying to answer the first question. I think reducing the conflict in Syria to Bashar, and then just pinpointing him and ignoring the other variables, including that there was a struggle for changing the geopolitics of the region by using, let's say, the very important human rights concept and so on and so forth. So I think a big picture is the answer to the first question, not just a single factor analysis. not on actorship and consequences. I try to, again, answer scholarly. But let me tell you, I'm proud of my country. I'm not ashamed Iranian. My country, regardless of this, in this sense, I'm not diplomat, I'm very Iranian, I have to say. I'm proud of what my country is, regardless of all this propaganda against my country. Why? Because Iran stands still in Asia, in global politics, regardless of all which has been done to it. And in answering to your question, actorship, when you take your actorship significantly, you reach a self-confidence. And Iran is enjoying this self-confidence, regionally and globally. One factor which I wish I had time to explain. In this region, Iran is significant for being able to produce its own security by itself. We don't rely on the others, software-wise and hardware-wise. If we had not taken our actorship seriously, and if we had relied on the others for our daily life, the consequences would be different. So I think when you take actorship seriously, you reach this self-confidence. And look at Iranian security. Domestic, regional security, external security, all provided by domestic sources. Hardware, software. It is the result of taking this actorship seriously. Let me be a little professorial. As a professor, what I really contribute to my students is giving them a self-confidence. That you can read, you can argue, you can even challenge the big names of international relations. But if you think international relations, big names cannot be challenged, and you are just very low, you never reach this critical thinking level of being able to self-confidently analyze the others. So on the civilizational actor, which is very interesting question. Time's up.
Yeah, just answer.
Civilization is back to international politics. Culture is back to international politics. International politics is not per se the power politics of Morgantian worldview. And in that regard, about 20, 25 years, we see the gradual rise of civilization as a concept of interaction, be it language, be it religion, be it the mindset. And you see civilization was used by Huntington as a conflictual concept. Do you remember? Clash of civilization. Then Iran, as an actor, responded. Then you see, after that, coalition of civilization. Now in the UN, you have a coalition called Coalition of Civilization. Spain is there, Turkey is there, and they have ministerial levels, each General Assembly meeting, and I had been in a couple of them representing my country. Then you look at India today. India is saying that even today I heard that they want even to change the name of India to a type of civilizational component. I think civilization in this regard is very important, and it has a strategic component. One is that it is not just the West, which is dominant, hegemonic, and the others have something also to contribute. And second, it's becoming a source of cooperation. Civilizational cooperation is a concept used especially in Asia as a continent and also at the global level. So I think I answered your questions, no?
Yep. Thank you. Yes.
Any new jokes you need? I will
We're okay. We'll have jokes during the break. On behalf of everyone, students, professors, audience members, diplomats, everyone, we are very grateful to you. You gave us lots of food for thought. And now let's go replenish ourselves with some with a break. Thank you very much, Professor.